revealed 10 spine-chilling true road trip horror stories that expose sinister, haunted secrets. Mike, Jenna, and their daughter Sophie had always dreamed of a summer road trip, a chance to explore the forgotten corners of America. As they drove amidst the golden fields and quiet backroads of the Midwest, excitement painted their faces. But as they approached the tiny town of Maple Hollow, known for its quirky roadside attractions, an unsettling chill slithered down their spines. At first, the town charmed them. Old diners flickered with neon lights, and flea markets promised hidden treasures. They laughed and shared stories, but something felt off in the air. It was there, at the local diner, where Earl, the owner, greeted them with an unnaturally wide smile. As he poured their drinks, his remarks about their lives sliced through the atmosphere, too personal, too probing. The way he leaned in, his breath warm with secrets, made Jenna shiver. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table, laughter dying as the family's unease grew. They ventured out into the eerily vacant streets, the air thickening, leaving behind the din of laughter for whispers of dread. A dilapidated farmhouse loomed at the outskirts, obscured by the tales of a family that vanished long ago. Instinct screamed for them to steer clear, yet curiosity gnawed at their resolve. An unspoken family tradition of unearthing history pulled them toward the ominous structure. Inside the farmhouse, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped them. Dusty dolls with cracked smiles stared at them from the shadows. Faded photographs hung askew on the walls, capturing a family so vibrant now reduced to mere echoes in time. Tremors raced through Mike as he touched a toy laying forgotten on the floor, a shiver tracing up his spine. Whispers curled around them, rising from hidden corners, shadows flickering just beyond their vision. They rolled their eyes, trying to dismiss their fear, but each creak of the aged timber felt alive, as if the house were breathing, watching. When they returned to the diner, the oppressive weight of Earl's welcome was suffocating. His tales of a vibrant past dripped with an unsettling nostalgia, every smile twisting into a smirk. Mike's heart sank as he realized their car was missing. Panic surged, a bond of desperation. Was it stolen, or something worse? They blinked into the whiteness of Earl's grin as confusion turned to terror. Every friendly face in the diner morphed into something monstrous, people grinning while hiding a sinister truth. Hours turned into an eternal nightmare. Each second thickened with dread as Mike and Jenna turned on each other, each suspicion a knife twisted deeper. They shared frantic whispers, voices rising in panic, skirting around darkened corners. Their life beyond Maple Hollow felt as distant as a fairy tale, the road home now an unreachable land. As they staggered toward the farmhouse once again, the door creaked open, inviting yet foreboding. Earl's voice echoed behind them, soft and menacing. You might become part of the story, just like the family who disappeared. They stepped closer to the threshold, their hearts racing. What terrible secrets lay just beyond that door? The twilight settled, shadows thickening, and the eyes of the past bore down on them, asking a single question: would they join the echoes of the lost souls? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Staring into the darkness of the farmhouse, the whispers curled around their thoughts like smoke. The walls seemed to pulse with unspoken tales. Shadows reached out to ensnare them, and the laughter that once brightened their lives echoed low and mournful like a warning. What truths lay waiting in the silence, and would they unravel them before it was too late? The door creaked wide, its sound reverberating through the chilled air. Shadows danced in the depths of the farmhouse, taunting Mike, Jenna, and Sophie as they hesitated on the threshold. The eerie darkness inside swallowed them whole. They shuffled in, stepping lightly on the wooden floor that groaned under their weight. Maybe we should call the sheriff, Jenna whispered, casting a wary glance back toward the door. But her voice trembled, doubt biting hard at her resolve. Sophie clutched her mother's hand tightly, eyes wide in a mix of terror and curiosity. "I don't think there's anyone around to call," Mike said, trying to sound brave but failing miserably. His heart raced like wild horses, each beat echoing in the silence. Every step further into the house made the oppressive air more tangible, crawling over their skin, infusing fear deep into their bones. Dust motes danced in the dim light filtering through grimy windows, but the flicker of movement from the corner of Mike's eye jerked him away from the sight. "Did you see that?" he blurted out, fishing for reassurance. But Jenna only tightened her grip on Sophie. The oppressive air whispered secrets, saying things they could not yet comprehend as they ventured deeper. The living room spread out before them like a macabre museum. It was a graveyard of familiarity, filled with relics of the family that once called this place home. Torn upholstery sagged on a faded couch, and misshapen picture frames hung askew on the walls, capturing moments of presumed happiness, now marred with grotesque distortions of time. "What happened to them?" Sophie asked, her youthful innocence a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. Mike knelt to examine a photo that teetered precariously on the edge of a table, revealing a family portrait that left a chill slither down his spine. Their faces were bound in unnatural smiles, eyes too large and too dark, a feeling heavy as fog, wrapped around him as if trying to pull him into the picture. He dropped the frame as if burned, listening to its shatter echo against the farmhouse's eerie quiet. Jenna glanced at Mike, concern etched on her face. "Let us go back," she urged, but her voice wavered, hinting at the growing terror that pressed on them all. Suddenly, the wind howled outside, and with it came a crashing sound from the darkened kitchen, like plates being thrown in a fit of rage. The noise splintered their fragile bravery. The family jumped, adrenaline surging, hearts pounding in unison. "What was that?" Sophie whimpered. "Probably just the wind," Mike lied, forcing an unsteady smile that did little to mask the fear gnawing at him. But they all knew the truth. This wasn't just about wind. Sophie tugged at her mother, pulling her toward the kitchen. "Let us check." "Wait," Mike shouted, but the moment of hesitation had already passed. Jenna stepped forward, compelled by an unseen force. Reluctantly, Mike followed, half seeking to protect them and half lured by a morbid curiosity. As they entered, an overwhelming sense of wrongness enveloped them. The kitchen felt alive, the shadows pulsating, shadows morphing into shapes of things that shouldn't be. The air thickened, and a rancid smell hung low like a fog of despair. With each passing moment, their breaths quickened. Jenna's eyes darted around, searching for something or someone. And then, in the far corner, she saw it. A figure. The silhouette stood still, its back turned, shrouded in darkness. But the hairs on Jenna's neck prickled with a primal awareness. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice breaking above the stillness. Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating until the figure turned slowly. Eyes glowed like fading embers, and a grin stretched unnaturally wide across its face, a mirror of Earl's twisted smile. "Welcome home," it whispered. Jenna's scream erupted, shattering the fragile silence wrapped around them. They turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, sealing their fate. As the darkness encroached, they could hear the whispers grow louder, wrapping around them like chains of despair. The farmhouse with its hungry walls demanded offerings. Would they become part of the echoes, or could they escape the nightmare? Outside, the oppressive stillness morphed into something worse as the town of Maple Hollow watched, hungry for fresh stories what awaited them next. And would they find a way to escape the clutches of the hollow-eyed figures that lurked just beyond the perimeter of sanity? Jenna's scream echoed like a banshee in the suffocating kitchen, reverberating off walls that seemed to absorb fear like a sponge. Mike felt his heart constrict in his chest, panic clawing at his throat as he reached for Jenna and Sophie. "Get back," he shouted, eyes darting between the figure and the door, which now stood solid, as if mocking their attempted escape. The figure shifted, and its head tilted in a way that shouldn't be humanly possible. The smile had grown, stretching wider, every tooth sharp and gleaming in the dim light. Jenna stumbled back, dragging Sophie towards the far wall, as if seeking sanctuary in the shadows. "Why won't it let us go?" Sophie whimpered, terror painting her face. "Shoo." Jenna pressed her finger to her lips. But for what? It was too late for quiet. The thing in the corner took a step toward them, and the floor screamed in protest under its weight. "Run!" Mike yelled, lunging toward the door that had sealed their fate. He pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge, as if the house had decided to swallow them whole. The whispers intensified, swirling around them, chaotic but coherent. Names, dates, lost promises, all crashing against their psyche like waves of drowning despair. "Don't just stand there," Mike cried, his voice hoarse. "Help me." Jenna joined him, both of them slamming their shoulders against the door. But it was useless. The wood felt alive and wicked. They were not just trapped. They were ensnared in a web of darkness, each heartbeat resonating with the evil that loomed over them. The figure advanced further, the shadows twisting around its body, haunted by memories long buried in the walls. "You've come to stay," it hissed, voice smooth like silk but threaded with malice. "You can't leave. You're part of it now." "No," Sophie cried out, indignation mixing with fear. "We want to stay." But the entity just laughed, a hollow, echoing sound, deep enough to chill the marrow in their bones. Jenna's desperation kicked in. She fumbled for anything, a knife, a pan, something solid to defend them. "Mike, look!" She gestured wildly towards the countertop, where a rusted old knife lay forgotten beneath papers thick with grime. "Grab it," he urged, his breath coming in ragged gasps as Jenna sprinted to retrieve the knife. Mike turned back to the figure, anchored to the floor by sheer terror. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, but he felt magnetized to the horror before him. It was feeding off their fear, pulling them deeper into its hungry maw. "Don't come any closer," Mike shouted, though the bravado in his voice shook with uncertainty. The figure paused, eyes gleaming with a predatory gleam. "You think you can fight what is already yours?" It snarled, lunging forward with impossible speed. Jenna reappeared, knife in hand, brandishing it between them and the figure. "Stay back," she yelled, finding her resolve. Yet it was too late to turn back. The farmhouse shuddered, its walls whispering an ancient melody of grief and longing, pulling at the threads of their sanity. Suddenly, a jarring tremor vibrated through the floor, knocking Mike and Jenna off balance. The kitchen began to morph, the walls pulsating, flickering with faint images of lives lost, choices made, screams unheard. Each shift deepened their panic, urging them forward into a spiral they might never escape. "Mike, the basement!" Jenna's voice was shrill with urgency as she pointed to a dark doorway behind the startled figure, leading down into a void they couldn't yet comprehend. Without thinking, they bolted, hearts pounding like war drums, the sound of their frantic footsteps swallowed by the frantic whispers behind them. They plunged into the darkness, arms wrapped around their trembling bodies, driven by the primal urge to survive. But the stench of decay seeped into their lungs, and it felt like they were diving into the abyss. The figure's laughter followed them, echoing, resonating like a death knell as they reached the base of the stairs. The air grew heavier, and a darkness unlike any they'd ever known pooled around them. "What was that?" Sophie squeaked, her eyes wide. "I don't know," Jenna replied, glancing back at the narrow staircase. "But we need to find a way out, fast." Yet all around, the shadows swirled, hungry and alive. What was waiting for them in the basement? And would it be the key to their escape, or their doom? The answers loomed closer with every breath, but the very air was thick with secrets yet revealed. The basement yawned before them, an abyss of darkness that made Jenna's skin prickle. The air became heavy with a damp chill, as if the walls themselves breathed in tandem with their fears. "What if it follows us?" Sophie's voice wavered, full of dread. "It won tea," Mike said, though his throat felt tight with uncertainty. "We just need to find something to barricade the door." He felt the knife in Jenna's hand, glimmering like a fragile promise of safety. "Look," Jenna pointed to a pile of boards and old furniture crammed against one corner. "We can use those." They rushed to the pile, hearts racing with every glance back at the staircase. The echo of their footsteps drowned out by the faint whispers of lost souls. The basement felt claustrophobic, closing in around them. Mike started prying at the boards, adrenaline coursing through him as he tried to stay focused. With every creak of the wood, the darkness stirred. Shadows unfurled, taking shape as if the basement itself resented their presence. "Hurry," Jenna urged, her voice edged with panic. Just then, a low rumble echoed through the basement, sending a chill down Mike's spine. Was it the figure pursuing them? He forced himself to look toward the staircase. The silence felt deafening. No laughter, no footsteps. What if he began? But Jenna's eyes widened. "Don't," she hissed. Another tremor jolted through the ground, and the walls seemed to ripple, whispering secrets they didn't want to hear. It was like the house had a pulse, a heartbeat thrumming with a wicked rhythm, urging them to succumb to despair. As they managed to pull a large board free, the shadows around them shimmered, coiling like smoke coming alive. "What is happening?" Sophie gasped, her breath quickening. She clutched her sister's arm tightly, as if seeking to anchor herself against the tide of fear. "I don't know, but we can't stay here," Mike shouted, as he tossed the board against the door. It thudded against the wood but did little to reassure him. He felt exposed, vulnerable. Behind them, the darkness shifted again, this time thicker, more deliberate. A sense of foreboding wrapped around them like a serpent. It flickered at the corner of his vision, a writhing shape, crawling out from the edges of the shadowy void. "Jenna!" Mike turned to see her staring at something behind him, eyes wide with horror. When he spun around to look, he found nothing but absolute darkness. Yet, he could feel it, the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing in upon him. "We need to go," he urged, his voice rising into a desperate shout. "What if it's trapped us?" Jenna whispered, eyes darting nervously, searching for something, anything that could help them. "They can't trap us if we don't let them." Mike's knees trembled as he forced himself to confront the void, gripping the knife tightly. "We pushed through." With a determined rush, they moved as one. They would climb over the remnants of despair or fight their way through an unseen enemy. Together, they breathed in the musty air, moving deeper into the basement, hoping for salvation or at least a way forward. But before they could reach the far corner, a sound shattered the silence. A scraping, like nails on wood, began at the staircase. The figure was aware of their hideaway. "What now?" Sophie whimpered, fear spilling from her eyes. "Find something, anything," Jenna screamed, tossing aside debris as the room grew colder still. They huddled together, ready to face whatever horror awaited them, praying it wouldn't be too late. And then, Mike noticed something glimmering amidst the wreckage, catching the faint light filtering from the staircase, a faded photograph, crumpled and damp. "Wait, look at this," he said, grabbing it with shaking hands. The faces in the photo blurred in the dim, sickly light of the basement. "Who are they?" Jenna asked, leaning over his shoulder, and horror etched itself onto her face as she recognized the malevolent glow that danced in the eyes of one figure among them, a familiar grin. Before Mike could respond, a roar erupted from the staircase, sharp enough to tear through the air. The figure was coming for them, hungering for their souls. "Hold on," he yelled, clutching the photo tighter. Their past and present were colliding in a world of darkness. Would the truth set them free, or bind them to the ancient horrors of this place? As the figure unfurled from the shadows, rising like a storm, Mike realized the real question. What would they have to sacrifice to break its grip? The figure loomed, shifting through the shadows with a sinister grace, its form both familiar and grotesque. Mike's heart thudded painfully in his chest as panic surged. The photograph slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the ground. Time slowed as the figure advanced, a dense silence hanging in the air, thick with dread. "Run!" Jenna screamed, breaking the spell of terror that had paralyzed them. They bolted toward the far corner, desperate to put distance between themselves and the encroaching darkness. As they moved, the basement seemed to twist, the walls leaning inward as if the place itself were an entity, seeking to crush them within its embrace. Shadows danced wildly, flickering like candles in a gale. As the scraping sound grew louder, a grating, seam-rending noise that echoed through the cramped space. "What do we do?" Sophie cried, glancing back. Her face was ashen, eyes wide, a mirror to Micah's own terror. "Find a way out. There has to be a door or something," Mike shouted, scanning the walls for any hint of escape. Each heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out the whispers that slithered through the air, trying to lure them into the abyss. They reached a wall, rough stone digging into their palms as they searched for a hidden door or crack, a passage to freedom. The photographs scattered like leaves at their feet, mercilessly twisting memories into anguish. Mike felt the weight of the one they had read, pressing down with every beat of his heart. Suddenly, Jenna jerked her head up, eyes gleaming with a mix of hope and despair. "The window," she gasped, pointing at a small, barred opening high above them. "Pull me up," Mike commanded, adrenaline surging through him like wildfire. They would take any chance to escape. Sophie grabbed his waist, lifting while Jenna steadied him. As Mike's fingers grasped the cold steel bars, a bone-chilling laugh erupted from the staircase, followed by a rush of frigid air. The figure loomed closer, its eyes burning with a malevolent hunger that reached into Mike's core. "Faster," he urged, panic clawing at his throat. Just as he hoisted himself up, the figure appeared at the staircase, its silhouette etched against the dim light, a diabolical shadow that promised despair. Mike squeezed his body through the window, the bars scraping painfully against him. He felt a tug at his shirt. Jenna cried out as one of the figure's shadowy hands grasped her ankle. "No," Mike shouted, stretching toward her. The basement echoed with the sound of her scream, nearly cracking his resolve. He could see her eyes filled with terror, but he had to keep climbing. He could only hope Sophie could pull her free. With a final push, he burst through the window. The night air rushed around him, cool and fresh, stark against the choking breath of the basement. He rolled onto the grass outside, gasping as he turned back to help. "Jenna!" he screamed, scrambling up to his feet. But as he looked inside, the shadows swallowed her scream, dragging it into the dark void. Sophie appeared, her face flushed with strain. "I can't hold her," she said, trembling. Mike lunged forward, desperate to yank Jenna away from the grip of darkness. But the air thickened as dread settled over them. "Jenna, hold on." But the basement groaned, the shadows mimicking their cries, and he could see the figure lunging, hungry and insatiable. "No," Mike yelled, but before he could reach her, a final gurgle of pain echoed from within, and then it went quiet. The basement sealed itself like a tomb, the darkness consuming its own. He and Sophie stood at the brink, horror-stricken, knowing they might have lost Jenna forever. "What do we do now?" Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Mike replied, breathing heavily. "We need to find a way to get her back. We can't leave her." But deep in his gut, an icy realization settled. The truth glimmered behind every shadow, revealing a horror far greater than a single sacrifice. What had they uncovered here? As the air around them thickened with anticipation, they felt the pull of the basement once more. "What if it wants us to?" Sophie whispered, eyes wide with fear. The weight of the darkness laughed, echoing in their ears, reminding them that sometimes escape only leads to greater horrors. The night felt alive, pulsating with a sinister energy that clawed at Mike and Sophia's sanity. They stood in the cold embrace of the moonlight, staring at the dark maw of the basement from which no sound escaped. Fear gripped them, tightening its hold like a vice around their hearts. Mike felt sick, the kind of sick you get when you know something is very wrong but you can't call it by name. "Maybe we should call for help," Sophie suggested, her eyes darting to the trees beyond the yard, as if imagining rescue would spring from the darkness itself. She fumbled for her phone, trembling fingers betraying her fear. "No, no phones." Mike shook his head. The last thing they needed was to drag more people into this nightmare. "It doesn't matter anyway. What if the figure is still watching us?" Sophia's eyes widened. "What if we go inside? Maybe we can find a way not just to save Jenna but to understand what that thing is." A sharp chill slid down Mike's spine. We can't go back in there. Took her. We can't just walk into the mouth of the beast. But even as he protested, an awful curiosity pulled at him. The basement loomed like a dark puzzle, and somewhere in its depth lay the answers to the horror they had stumbled upon. Just think, Sophie pleaded. What if Jenna's still alive? It might be waiting for the right moment. With a deep breath, Mike found himself nodding, the terror twisting in his gut. Fine. We go, but we stick together. No splitting up. If something happens, we run. Got it? Sophie swallowed hard, then nodded. They moved slowly towards the entrance, each step steeped in shadows, every creak of the floorboards charging the air with foreboding. The basement door hung ajar, as if inviting them deeper into its depths. The stench of mold and mildew wrapped around them like an unwanted embrace. Mike stepped inside, heart pounding relentlessly. Jenna! He called, voice echoing into the oppressive stillness, only to be met with the mocking silence of the abyss. Sophie peered through the darkness, the dull glow of a flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. Over here, she whispered, pointing. A flicker of movement caught her eye, something just beyond view skittering along the cold, damp floor. Did you see that? Mike squinted, dread creeping in. The shadows shifted, almost alive, and he could feel something watching them, something creeping ever closer. Before they could react, a startled animal, a rat, darted from beneath a pile of debris, spurring them both to jump. It's just a rat, Mike gasped, breathing heavily. But a worse fear gnawed at him. What if it's feeding on the remains of... They pressed on, crossing deeper into the basement's gloomy embrace, walls closing in as memories flickered like half-remembered dreams. The metal contraptions from earlier lay scattered across the floor, grime coating their surface. A sudden flash of cold air snuffed out the meager warmth from their bodies, and with it, a voice broke the silence, a low, seductive whisper, as if the basement itself were alive and calling them by name. Mike, Sophie, the words slithered over them, curling like fingers around their throats. They froze, eyes wide. Did you hear that? Sophie gasped, heart racing wildly. Yes. Mike hissed, panic rising like bile. It's the basement. It knows our names. The walls trembled, a low growl of discontent rippling through the structure as if it were a living thing. We need to get out now, Mike hissed. But before they could react, something heavy slammed against the door behind them, bearing the way they'd come in. Thud, 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 run, Mike shouted, panic driving him forward, dragging Sophie behind him as they sprinted towards the far corner where shadows loomed ominously. The oppressive voice erupted into a choir of laughter, mockery wrapping around them, nearly suffocating in its intensity, whispering secrets of what lay below and what it wanted from them. There was no longer safety anywhere, and with it, the knowledge that something had their names, had their fate, and it wasn't done with them yet. They reached the opposite wall. Mike spotted a glimmer of hope, a faint opening where the floorboards had splintered. Here. This way, he yelled, diving towards it, dragging Sophia along as the shadows lunged, looming closer. But just before they could slip through, the laughter deepened, morphing into a chilling chant. Leave, enter, join, and in that moment, an astonishing realization hit. What if Jenna hadn't just been taken? What if she had chosen to stay? Mike's heart sunk as the darkness surged around them, hungry and relentless. What had they really unleashed? Go, he shouted, desperation amplifying every motion. We can't stay here. As they pushed through the narrow opening, Mike's eyes were drawn back just once, an instinct embedded in the soul. In the dim light, a figure appeared at the far end of the basement. Jenna, her eyes wide and hollow, a ghost of the girl they once knew. Help me, she rasped, even as the shadows closed in around her. Mike froze. What if the figure wanted them all? What if it was possible she didn't want to leave? He turned to Sophie. Their fate tangled with Jenna's, and murkiness enveloped the air. What do we do? He breathed, his determination wavering. But behind them, those shadows shifted, and within them, a new horror brewed, waiting, always waiting. Terror gripped Mike as he turned back toward the darkness. Jenna's image lingered in his mind, her hollow eyes screaming louder than her voice. What had she become in that void? He wanted to scream, wanted to know more, but dread splintered his thoughts, wrapping cold fingers around his courage. Mike, we can't stay here. Sophie's urgent whisper cut through his paralysis. She tugged at his arm, adrenaline coursing through her voice, but Mike remained frozen. Look at her, he murmured, pointing. What if it's a trick? Maybe she's not, Sophie stammered, eyes shimmering with confusion and fear. She needs us. We need to help her, Mike. But as Jenna's form flickered, shadows danced around her, and the basement swung open like a maw, breathing in the stale air. It felt alive, pulling at their souls. The laughter echoed all around them, scraping against their minds, each laugh a cruel reminder that they were not alone. Suddenly, from the dark, a figure stepped into the dim light, too tall and slender, its limbs exaggerated, as if crafted from the very shadows that birthed it. Fear gripped them both, a binding, choking fear that made it hard to breathe. This was not merely a trick of the light. This was something else. Get back, Mike shouted, pulling Sophie closer as the figure drifted toward them, whispering sweet nothings that made the air thick with despair. You don't belong here. We need to leave. The basement seemed to pulsate with the figure's movement, every heartbeat echoing through time, surrounding them. An overwhelming sense of doom pushed against their chests as they watched helplessly, terror closing in on all sides. Join us, the figure crooned, the sound curling around them like smoke, sweet and suffocating. Mike's heart thudded painfully against his ribcage. It wasn't he just trying to lure them. It was trying to consume them. Run! Sophie shouted, breaking Mike from his petrified daze. They turned just as the beams of light from their flashlights began to flicker, each moment dimming until all they had was the heavy darkness threatening to swallow them whole. They dashed towards the opening, the figure's breath a chilling wind at their backs. Shadows clawed at their heels, the walls whispering their dread. Mike grasped Sophie's wrist tighter, terrified she'd slip away into the darkness, just like Jenna. With one final push, they stumbled through the gap, crashing into a damp coldness beyond an old root cellar, a remnant of another time. The ground was eerily soft beneath them, a thick layer of rot and decay soaking through their shoes. They crawled out into the space, choking on instinctual panic. Where are we? Sophie gasped, her voice trembling as she scanned the area. The walls here looked ancient, fungus climbing in the dim light. I don't know, Mike breathed, struggling to steady his racing heart. But before they could catch their breath, a whisper echoed around them again, more insistent this time. Stay. No, we have to go back. Sophie pleaded, the panic rising in her voice. But there was something in the air, a compulsion, a darkness that made it difficult to move. They stumbled further into the cellar. The flickering light cast unreal shadows that twisted and trembled. In the corner of the room, Mike spotted a dusty mirror. The surface was cracked, but more than that it felt wrong, like it reflected something beyond their world. Look at this, he said, stepping closer, his breath hitching in his throat. A vague outline started to coalesce in the glass. Not just reflections of themselves, but Jenna, her silhouette, sad and wistful, gazing back at them. Jenna, Sophie cried, reaching out toward the mirror. Mike felt a sudden jolt of dread, an instinct screaming for him to pull her back. Don't, Sophie, don't touch it, he shouted, but it was too late. Sophie moved forward, entranced. But the hollow eyes of Jenna turned fierce, and the world around them began to shake. The mirror rippled violently, distorting their reality just as Jenna had become distorted, lost somewhere within. Help me, she screamed, but this time the plea was filled with desperation, a demand rather than a request, echoing against the walls. Everything surged, the shadows whispering dark promises, and within that moment, Mike realized they weren't meant to escape. They were being drawn in. He lunged forward, grabbing Sophia's hand. We have to go. But as they turned, the floor beneath them shifted. The last thing Mike saw before everything went black was Jenna's twisted form, her voice now a wail of anguish echoing in his ears. Suddenly, silence engulfed them, and with a shuddering breath, A familiar echo whispered through the dark, "Join what had they unleashed? And what if this was only the beginning?" Inside the darkness, Mike's eyes fluttered open to a suffocating silence. He gasped, the air thick with an earthy stench, a cocktail of mold and dirt. As his vision adjusted, a flickering loom slashed through the void, revealing the shadowy confines of the cellar. "Sophie?" he croaked, panic clawing at his throat. He twisted around, desperately seeking her figure. Shadows clung to the walls like hungry tendrils, curling and entwining around his frantic heart. "Mike?" Her voice drifted, distant but close enough to send a surge of relief streaming through him. He followed the sound, pushing against the pull of overwhelming despair closing around him. "Sophie, where are you?" he shouted, the sound echoing off the stone walls. The chill seeped deeper, sending shivers racing across his skin. "Over here," she called back, trembling. He spotted her in the dim light, crouched against a shelf lined with decayed and forgotten relics. A few candles flickered atop the piled junk, illuminating her fear-streaked face. He hurried to her, kneeling in the damp earth. "What happened?" "We were the memory of the twisted." Jenna rushed back with a vengeance, igniting dread anew. "We can't stay here. We need to find a way out now." Sophie nodded, clutching an old lantern that flickered feebly, casting ghostly shapes over their faces. "But it's like the air is different down here, Mike. I can feel something." He nodded, feeling it too, an oppressive pressure, as if the walls were closing in, breathing with malevolence. "We have to keep moving. Stay close." They moved cautiously deeper into the cellar, shadows warping with every flicker of the lantern. The whispers surged around them again, this time sharper, almost distinct. Stay, everything twisted in Mike's gut. "Ignore it," he murmured, squeezing Sophie's hand tighter. "Just don't listen." But as they walked further, an almost magnetic pull drew them toward an end wall shrouded in more shadows than the others. An archway, partially obscured, seemed to beckon, the darkness swirling like smoke. The whispers intensified, and he swore he felt the wall breathe. "It's calling us," Sophie said, her voice barely a whisper, layered with both dread and curiosity. "It's a trap." Mike's heart raced. "We can't let it fool us." But curiosity was a poison. He felt it infecting both their minds. Within that creeping darkness, shapes began to emerge, forming faces twisted in eternal anguish. A woman, her eyes sockets hollow and mouth agape, stood just inside the shadows. "Help us," she pleads, hand outstretched, skin like that of rotted flesh. "Get back," Mike shouted, yanking Sophie away just as the woman surged forward with a visceral snarl, shadows shifting as if trying to understand their lives. "Run." They turned, scrambling back toward the way they'd come, hearts pounding a chaotic rhythm of sheer terror. But just as they reached the entry point, everything jerked violently, the ground rolling beneath them as if the cellar itself were alive. "No, no!" Sophie screamed, the lantern flickering dangerously low. Shadows erupted into grotesque forms, reaching and clawing. The walls seemed to compress. Mike felt like a fish caught in a net of despair. "Hold on to me," Mike yelled, grasping her wrist, determination surging as he turned, setting his shoulders against the thrumming darkness. He could feel their souls clutching at him, whispering soft promises of rest and surrender. They stumbled into a room, bursting with light that sprang forth from a grotesque, glowing mirror at its center. The pulsing glow held shadows within a dancing parade of lost souls trapped by their own despair. The air crackled with energy, filling their lungs with an acrid taste of fear. "Sophie," Mike gasped, instinctively pulling her closer. "Do not look. We have to break it." But the mirror surged violently, its surface rippling. Faces reached out as if attempting to break free, Jenna's twisted form among them, eyes wide with unspeakable horror. "Join us," the trapped souls wailed, their cries suffocating the air. Real terror gripped Mike's heart, fear coiling tighter than before. "Sophie, please, we have to fight it." He could feel the darkness closing in again, wrapping around him like an anaconda. Time blurred as desperation etched itself into his mind. He pulled Sophie back, deep breaths mingling with dread, both desperate and enraged. Without thinking, he grabbed the lantern from her trembling hands and hurled it at the mirror. It shattered upon impact, a rain of burning glass cascading into the room like a falling star, and then silence. What lay at the edge of that darkness? What had they released by shattering the mirror? As the darkness shifted and murmured behind them, the reality tumbled into chaos. They had only begun to uncover the horrifying truths buried there, and the shadows stirred once more, eager for retribution. The silence hung heavy, oppressive, smothering like a thick blanket. Mike felt the weight of it pressing against his chest. He stared into the shattered remnants of the mirror, shards glinting like jagged teeth. What had they unleashed? The shadows twisted, creeping closer, as if drawn to the broken surface. Sophie, he breathed, twisting back to her. Her face was pale, eyes wide and unblinking, as if frozen in terror. Mike, I can feel something. Her voice trembled, each word a struggle. Something's coming. From deep within the shadows, a low growl reverberated, twisting through the darkness like a living entity. It slithered into their ears, settling in the back of their minds. Run! He shouted, the primal instinct taking over. Before he could grab her hand, they both felt it, a cold grip wrapping around their ankles, pulling them down. Mike! Sophie screamed, a blend of terror and desperation. He lunged for her, pulling her up just as the darkness hissed, almost triumphantly. The grip loosened momentarily, but the pressure built again, thicker and more suffocating than before. Keep moving, he urged, dragging her toward another exit that appeared in the flickering light. It was a narrow passage, barely visible beneath the undulating waves of shadow. Where does it lead? She asked, her voice tinged with doubt and fear. Anywhere but here, Mike replied, and with a determined shove, he pushed them through the archway, the air rushing past like icy fingers clutching at their skin. They stumbled into another room. The air here felt stale, thick with dread, but there was a reprieve from the shadows. Flickering torches lined the walls, illuminating strange symbols etched into stone. Hints of ancient magic laced through the air. The light danced frantically, swallowing the darker corners of the room but casting long, stretching shadows that seemed to writhe. What is this place? Sophie whispered. I don't know, Mike admitted, his heart hammering wildly in his chest. But we need to find something, anything to use against whatever is hunting us. As he surveyed the room, an overwhelming sense of being watched washed over him. He paused, looking over his shoulder. The shadows flickered violently closer. We need to hurry, he urged, scanning the shelves littered with strange artifacts, bones wrapped in tattered fabric, a dagger with a hilt shaped like twisted vines, and strange jars that pulsed with a soft, inner light. A blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness, echoing from the shadows, morphing into a chorus of laments. Help us! The cries twisted through the room like dark smoke. It's them, the souls from the mirror, Mike gasped, his gut tightening. It's drawing strength from their despair. Sophie stepped back, a look of anguish crossing her face. We have to get out of here, Mike. We can't help them. But what if we can? What if there's a way to release them? He protested, glancing at the dagger, feeling its pull. The desire to not only save themselves but to do something greater clawed at him. He felt himself teetering dangerously close to the edge of a decision that could seal their fate. Mike, no! Her voice quaked as she pleaded, but the shadows strained against the walls, their whispers rising. Help us! Join us! Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. The shadows snarled, boiling with rage as the walls began to close in. Panic surged through Mike. They wouldn't have the luxury of time to ponder. We'll figure it out as we go. He grabbed the dagger, its weight settling heavily in his palm. Let us go, he shouted, pulling Sophie into motion, forging ahead through the trembling dark. But as they reached the far side of the room, the entrance they had come from shifted. An impenetrable wall of shadow had formed right before their eyes, sealing them inside. Oh God! Sophie whimpered, her eyes wide with terror. What now? As they turned back to face the chamber, the shadows writhed and deepened, forming the grotesque shapes of tortured souls, dragging themselves into the dim light, seeking release. In a blink, the air thickened with their agony, swirling around Mike and Sophie like a tempest, a storm of despair they had awakened. Mike tightened his grip on the dagger, feeling its pulse a heartbeat against the chaos. Was this their only hope, or had they just sealed their doom by awakening something far more sinister? The shadows coalesced in front of them, their eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. The walls of the chamber echoed with a menacing hiss. Join us. Just then, a figure emerged, a familiar face lost among anguished Jenna, twisted and darkened, beckoning with a gnarled hand. Mike, help me. And deep inside, the darkness howled, hungry for its next meal. Would they dare confront it, or would despair consume them both? What have we done? The air in the chamber buzzed with an unnerving potency, the shadows twisting and curling like serpents, eagerly awaiting Mike and Sophie's next move. The cries and whispers filled the space, a cacophony of tortured souls, their voices begging for release while intertwining with anger that crackled in the air. Fear descended heavily upon them, filling every crevice of doubt deep in their minds. Mike could hardly think. The sight of Jenna, her essence twisted, eyes reflecting a void, sent shockwaves of dread through him. Jenna, he shouted, instinctively stepping forward, the dagger trembling in his grasp. What happened to you? Help me. Her voice, desperate yet ghostly, echoed within the chamber, triggering instinctive compassion that almost pulled him closer. But he hesitated, the darkness pulsing around her, keenly aware of his every emotion. No, she is not the same. Sophie reached for him, panic racing over her features. Mike, that is not her anymore. We can't fall for it. The shadowy figures closed in, a tide of anguish surging around them. But he couldn't abandon Jenna, not when she seemed to be reaching out, lost but still there. I want to leave her, Mike declared, ignoring Sophie's frantic tug. Mike, don't. It's a trap. But the shadows thickened, whispers morphing into a spell that dulled his senses. Join us, join her, they hounded, a throbbing pull toward Jenna, who stood unyielding, the air around her vibrating with untold torment. No, he yelled again, more desperately now. He lifted the dagger, its blade gleaming with potential, and took a step back, breathing heavily. I'll find a way to save you. He could almost believe he saw flickers of recognition in her hollow eyes. For a second, the darkness seemed to waver, like the ebb and flow of a tide pulling back. But then the room erupted with twisted laughter, snatching away that faint glimmer. The shadows lunged forward, pulsating, as if ready to devour his resolve. What do we do? Sophie cried, her voice strained under the pressure. She looked to Mike, her hope flickering. Maybe there's a way to free them. He felt the weight of the dagger in his hand, an anchor in the chaos. It had to be some sort of weapon against the darkness. We could try it, if we can break the bond. But deep inside, panic twisted anew. What if they only made it worse? They needed to act quickly. The shadows whispered louder, gnawing on their sanity. Help us, join us, they cried, calling their very names, weaving insecurities and doubts into a woven tapestry of despair. You can't escape enough, Mike roared, the shout shaking him free from the sinister grip that threatened to pull him down. With renewed purpose, he faced the encroaching darkness, a flicker of hope igniting within him. He needed to push through, to save Jenna and the rest of them. Fueled by adrenaline, he plunged the dagger into the ground, a fierce symbol of defiance against the shadows. You will not own us. The blade pierced deeply, igniting a surge of energy that crackled through the air like pulsing lightning. The reaction was immediate. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as if stung by fire. The faces in the dark twisted in agony, fading away. No, no, join us, they kept crying, but Mike stood firm, his heart pounding in sync with the humming energy that swelled around the blade. Jenna, fight, he urged, eyes fixed on her, imploring. Something flickered within her, a fleeting spark breaking through the stupor. She turned, a moment of clarity crossing her features. Mike, her voice was stronger, her image morphing slightly, revealing glimpses of the sister he once knew. "Let us help you. You're still in there," Sophie shouted, her voice cutting through the shadows, urging Jenna on as shadows writhed and twisted. Ethan felt the walls of the chamber tremble, breathing a terrible energy. The dagger pulsed. Maybe this was it, they could break free. The echoes of tortured souls began to quiet. They were fighting back. Together. "Jenna, take our hands." He stretched his out, desperately reaching for her. The darkness howled, fierce and furious. But Mike stood tall, determination flaring bright. "I'm not leaving you." With that, Jenna's face shifted, revealing a glimmer of recognition and resolve. She reached for them, her outstretched hand trembling but resolute as she fought against the shadows. "Help me, please." Together, they intertwined their hands, Mike, Sophie, and Jenna, forming a circle of defiance. The shadows lunged, but it was too late. They were stronger together. And then, something deep within the dagger ignited into a blinding light, a luminous force that surged through them. It bathed the chamber in bright brilliance, shattering the shadows like glass. "Release them," Mike cried, and the shadows screamed, engulfed in the radiant light. Luminous energy surged, pushing through the walls, wrapping around every visage of despair, siphoning their anguish into bright bursts of hope. With a deafening roar, the darkness imploded, revealing the true form of the room. As the shadows peeled away, the souls released broke free, swirling into the air above. Jenna stood among them, no longer twisted or tormented, but restored, the haze of despair lifting from her eyes. "Thank you," she gasped, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time, her smile lit up the room. The glow from the dagger pulsed one last time before fading, and the last of the souls dissipated, leaving only a stillness, a delicate quiet that resonated with peace. Breath caught in Mike's throat. Joy mixed with relief surged through him. "We did it." They embraced tightly, the terror of the shadows replaced with a profound sense of freedom. "Let us get out of here," Jenna said, wiping her tears. They nodded, understanding. The horror was behind them now. Mike, Jenna, and Sophie stepped into the world beyond, sunlight sparkling anew on their faces as they left the darkness behind, never to return. But deep within the shadows that still lingered in Maple Hollow, a sinister whisper lingered. Until next time now, this is the moment for you to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm because it really helps. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. What do you think happened to the souls? Did they truly escape? And finally, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans understand how crucial it is to support the channel through these actions.